welcome to Civic Punks, to our Postgame show. It has been 8 days since the Government Innovation Week that the Public Sector Network put on in British Columbia, and I am super excited to be joined here with two of my good friends, Laura and Martha, who are service designers within the Government of British Columbia, but are here in their personal capacity, and they both attended the event with me a week ago. So, Laura, Martha, first off, thank you so much for joining me here for this postgame. This is a bit of a new forum, a new thing I'm trying out here, so I appreciate you guys being my guinea pigs for this. Okay, so my big question for you really is, like, what is resonating with you a week afterwards from the event?
Yeah, sitting with the significance of leaders sharing out about work underway, about things that they are trying to advance as part of some of the broader changes that have been announced. So there's that opportunity to listen and to hear from persons that are involved in these changes about the sense making that they're doing, how they're approaching things. That was really valuable.
Yeah, I would say same for me. The BC government, we're going through a lot of changes right now into this new division called Connected Services, and so a lot of the kind of speakers talked about that change and kind of what the vision is, and some of the things that are happening and what's important to them. And so it was really helpful to kind of have that a little bit more clarity into what's happening. So I really appreciated that. And there was a big focus on talking to users, talking to the people using services, that's basically my job in government. So it was really great to hear about that. I was just really happy that got so much attention. But yeah, important for me, I was thinking a lot about, are we building in kind of the structures and capabilities to also listen to users and to, build in those supports so that the people who are kind of leading that work can surface those voices and bring them to events like these.
Yeah, I think, and Martha, you and I talked a bit about this at the event itself. Talk is great. Action is where things get hard. Action is where things get crunchy, particularly in times when there are budget cuts coming down the pipes. I think it's going to be interesting to see it sort of coming out of this. Clearly, the leadership has a vision for this, but how is that going to work when it's put into practice? That's usually where these things kind of fall down. But like you, I share the excitement around they're saying it, which is great. That you want to hear leadership talking about this stuff. I think that's going to be an important one. And I do think that the idea of listening, what does it mean for government to listen, is an interesting provocation. One of the things that I talked about in the pre-game show was that this is happening within a context. You guys are living this context. Huge changes happening within the government of British Columbia with the reorg around connected services, while at the same time large cuts are coming through the public service as well. And going into this event, there was a lot of sort of uncertainty around this change. What was your experience like at the event itself with the leadership, I think, trying to present sort of a vision for this change that's happening?
Yeah, I think it's really important to recognize that the types of changes that are being discussed and contemplated here, we know, from colleagues in other parts of Canada that very similar sorts of changes are being contemplated. And I think there are some really interesting aspects of what leaders here are speaking about, of, approaches to design, of getting under the hood of data interoperability and what does it mean to do that. I think I was really grateful to see the quality of thinking on those things in particular. I'm quite relieved in some respects. And so yeah, like I said at the outset, it was, really a great opportunity to be there and to listen, but also just to be amongst colleagues and to hear, about the work that is very much continuing on while we contemplate and see what comes forward in these other change areas. But I think maybe what stands out to me is that we are collectively working through uncertainty together. And I think that was also something that really stood out to me, and what was spoken about at the event itself was the need to work together and to find new ways to collaborate. And then also alongside that, just holding that in balance with the need to have clear accountability and decision making in order to actually be able to move forward with the types of changes that are being talked about.
Same for me. It was connecting with colleagues and, seeing lots of familiar faces, people that I don't usually see or work with. And yeah, it makes me kind of remember how important those connections are, and especially as we're moving into connected services, like thinking about ways that we can kind of build this culture of connection between teams. And this organizational culture around working together and sharing our work and having these conversations more regularly.
Yeah, it was interesting for me because I'm coming in as a bit of an outsider. I'm not on the ground as much, and I'd heard about the reorg that was happening, both from you, Martha, and also Heather Remackle had talked with me a bit about it when we were at Ford 50 together. And so I was quite intrigued and quite curious, but I was curious also to hear about the vision behind it. And so I think a highlight for me really was Shannon Salter's talk at the beginning of the first day, because I felt like she made a really compelling, like, why are we doing this, and really centering it, like you said earlier, Martha, around the people who use government services and what's their experience like, and designing government for them as opposed to what makes the most sense from a bureaucratic perspective. I think for me really sort of started the day off well, and I think this is just part of the process. This is going to need to continue. The government's still figuring out how to do this. What does it mean to truly be a connected service approach? How do we structure ourselves? How do we design ourselves? What does the workflow look like? So it'll be interesting to see how things ripple out in the weeks to come and the months to come. And so I'm very curious to see what's next. But like you, Martha, I think the highlight is always the people. It was so nice to see a lot of familiar faces, but also lots of new faces and get plugged in. I think one of the things that really struck me is like you really feel BC people know each other. It's a more tight knit community than I say like the federal government is, for example, in Canada, or in the UK or a lot of other countries I go to. You really feel that connection. People know each other all the way up. Like people, at the front lines seem to know people in more senior levels at a human level, which is amazing to see, and gives me hope. There's a book that is on my Christmas list that's sort of making the rounds right now in a bunch of spaces. It's called How Behavior Spreads, The Science of Complex Contagions. And one of the key things that talks about it is that ideas spread through loose, broad networks, but behavior changes because of tight-knit networks. What's happening now is a very large behavior change for the government, and these close-knit ties and the relationships that are fortified through events like this are going to be really key into creating the conditions needed for that behavior change to happen. So anyways, I'm quite excited about it. I'm curious to see where this is all going. I still have tons of questions. I guess this means I'm going to have to come back to BC again and see how things are doing in like 6 months from now. Amazing. Well, thank you both for making time. Have a great holidays.
Thank you.
Yeah, you too.
So it was great, it was great chatting with Laura and Martha. I just wanted to add to my own reflections moving forward on this. So, this event was a really interesting event. The context was fascinating. You could definitely there was both, like I said in the pregame, this is a context where there's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of rawness around this. Trust is low because of the strikes and all these different things. So it was really important that senior leadership struck a good tone. And I think they did a good job of this. They really highlighted the why, which I think for many public servants is important. Don't get into public service because for the paycheck or anything like that. Most people in the public service are there because of the mission. And so reconnecting why all these changes are happening to the why of the reason people are public services in the first place, and letting them know that this is actually going to help all of us be better at creating better services for the people of British Columbia, I think is something that was really a good note. And the structure they had around it, where they had, it started with the minister first, and then Shannon, who's the head of the civil service, second, and then really a bunch of her leadership team laying out the more practical steps, I think was a good way to sort of set the day and give some direction. Obviously, there's a lot to figure out yet. They're still figuring out exactly how does this work. And I do think if they do this right, BC could be a really good case study for us to look towards. But it's an uphill battle. There's going to be a lot of challenges ahead. It's one thing to talk about ideas. It's another thing to make them real. And one of the questions I had for Shannon, I'm hoping to, fingers crossed, have a follow-up interview with Shannon in January around this is really, how do we help, right? This is going to be a whole community effort to make this change happen. What does she need from the rest of the public service, from the community of British Columbia, and from civic punks like us all over the world to help BC be successful? Because I think that's the success. We all want British Columbia to be successful at making this connected services work. Because ultimately, not only do the people of British Columbia benefit from better government, but we all benefit from having inspiration for the rest of us to follow. So quite excited about that. I think there was a couple ideas that were really interesting as well with it. So one of the key ideas that was talked about at the event was cylinders of excellence. As sort of this reframing on the concept of silos. And the idea of cylinders of excellence, at least how I took it, is this recognition that sometimes you actually have really high functioning teams that are able to do amazing stuff within their silo. And actually having that protected silo allows them to be excellent. The problem is that's not how people engage with government. People don't engage with government in silos. So you can have all the cylinders of excellence you want, but if they're not connected, it doesn't matter. you're going to have a poor experience of the service or a very patchwork experience of the service, which I think is now becoming the norm. I think governments everywhere have cylinders of excellence. We have done a good job through the digital transformation movement to bring in really cool and exciting practices, but in piecemeal format. And I think the next phase is what BC is trying to do with this connected services, that, we need to break down those cylinders of excellence to create a government of excellence, because that's how citizens experience it. So it'll be interesting to see. And it was really interesting to also see the private sector there, and the vision, the ideas that the private sector has, and the opportunities, the tools, the resources they have to help support. I think one thing I would like to see more of at the next one in terms of moving forward is how do we better integrate the private sector into these conversations? Because it very much felt like two different conversations. It was the government talking about these changes that were happening and the private sector being like, hey, look at all these cool stuff that we can do. And I would love to see them be more of a conversation together about how the private sector can be part of the solution with government to creating better services. And actually to almost like workshop it. There's a lot of talk about, I want like more showing, like, it's sort of the demos, not memos kind of thing. I'd like to see more demos from the private sector showing how the resources, how they can support the government of British Columbia making this change. I think it'd be something that'd be interesting to see. And the other thing that I think would be cool to see next time is more people from the community. There's a whole ecosystem. Government exists within a larger context, right? You have people across the ecosystem who are part of this process, right? So having community organizations, having academics, having not-for-profits, and really bringing the whole system into the room. Like I said, Martha talked about having a user-centered approach to this, which is great, but it's one thing to talk about it. It'd be great to start seeing showing of it. Bring the users, the community into the room and have them work together and workshop. Like, let's build something, let's do something, let's show this in action. Let's start to create these sort of micro instances that can be scaled out is something that, I'd love to see next more of. Anyways, that's the post-game show for the Public Sector Network's Government Innovation Week in British Columbia. I'm really appreciative that I got a chance to go. It was really fun, inspiring to see the energy, the vision, and the possibilities. And it does give me hope because it's a challenging time in Canada right now. And I didn't really know where BC was at, and it's exciting to see the vision is still there. I wish them the best and hope that I can be part of helping them make it happen. And I also want to say a big, huge thank you to Andrew Jensen, the head of Public Sector Network, who really created this opportunity for me. Andrew, thank you so much for this. I really appreciate the faith you have in me in creating this, and hopefully we can do many more of these as this spreads around the world. So definitely, if you haven't had a chance yet, check out what the Public Sector Network is doing. They're doing a lot of really interesting stuff. We had a social I hosted with Andrew and the Public Sector Network team through One Team Gov while at the event. And it was really interesting. Andrew shared the story of what inspired him to really get Public Sector Network off the ground. And it's really this idea of connection and community. And that was truly inspiring. So join the community, become part of what the Public Sector Network's trying to do. Because these communities are what is needed to change government and change the world. So definitely join and jump into those communities. Other than that, stay tuned for more fun stuff. I'll definitely be back in British Columbia to see how they're doing in a few months' time. And we'll go from there. Have a great holiday. It's almost a holiday season, whether it's Christmas or Hanukkah or whatever it is you're celebrating. I hope you have a great holiday, and I hope you get a chance to spend time with family, with friends, eat lots of good food, and really celebrate this year. And hopefully, fortify yourself for next year. Next year's going to be a huge year for me as I travel the world with Civic Punks. But I hope it's a big year for you as well, and exciting year. So wishing you all the best and a happy new year.